Spring is here, and with that, everyone's mind turns to canning. Hi, I'm April Martin, and I work with TSU Extension of DeKalb County, and today I want to share with you some basic canning principles. We're going to be canning apples, and if you've never canned before, I want to introduce you to a few things before we get started. Whether you're canning fruits or vegetables, there's a couple of things you need to keep in mind. So when you get ready to can, you need to think about what type of food that you are canning. If you're canning fruits or tomatoes or jams or jellies or pickles, all those can be canned inside a water bath canner, which is just a really tall pan that has a rack on the inside for your jars. These can be purchased at hardware stores or at your big box stores, usually for under $30. And if you don't have a water bath canner, you can use a tall pan that has a lid on it, but then it's really good to have something in the bottom of it to protect the jars. Some people have used case knives and things like that just to protect the bottom of the jars. So for a lot of things that you're going to can at home, as I said, fruits, tomatoes, jams or jellies or pickles can all be processed in a water bath canner. Now, if you're going to be canning something, a vegetable that is not a tomato, for example, potatoes, corn, carrots, basically any vegetable that you can think of, or if you're canning meat or you're canning any kind of soup that has some of those vegetables in it, it must be canned inside of a pressure canner. And the reason for that is the temperature inside the canner, the pressure canner, reaches a higher temperature than it will in a water bath canner. And there's some foods that in order to kill any microorganisms inside and make it safe for you to consume, it needs to be canned at a higher temperature, so therefore you've got to use a pressure canner. But today we're just going to be canning apples, and that qualifies it to be able to be canned inside of a pressure canner. So let's get started on the things you'll need. First, we have our pressure canner. You also of course need your apples, and you'll have to look at your recipe to see how many jars that you're going to get out of a recipe. Recipe I'm using costs for 3 pounds of apples. You'll need, of course, your jars. You want to use jars that are meant for canning. The Mason type jars that have the screw lids, the screw bands, as well as the seals. And the lids need to be the lids that have never been used before. You cannot reuse these. After they've been used once, you have to toss them because it may not seal properly. So you've got your jars. You'll also want, with a lot of things that you can, you'll want some kind of acid like lemon juice or vinegar. And this is just to preserve the color so that it doesn't darken when it's processed. So you can also use lemon juice as well. These are really nice and handy to have, not very expensive at the stores. Your jar lifters, and that will help you lift the hot jars out of the canning pans. So let's get started. Before we get started, do me a favor and click the like button down below and subscribe to this channel so that you'll see more canning videos. The recipe I'm following today comes from our University of Tennessee Extension publication called Canning Foods, which is publication 724. This is something free that you can download from the UT Extension website at utextension.edu, and scroll down to the bottom until you see the catalog of resources, and then look for publication 724, Canning Foods. We're canning apples today, and apples, it's appropriate to either use a quart or a pint-sized jar. So the first thing that you want to do really before you even get started preparing your apples is to sanitize your jars, sanitize your screw band, and your lids that will go on this. And one way to do that is just regular washing, or you can also put it in your dishwasher. After your jars are clean, then what I like to do is to put my jars on a tray, like a cookie sheet tray, and set that in the oven at about 250 degrees to let those jars be getting good and hot before you're ready to pour your apples inside to be processed. It's a good idea to go ahead and put your jars in the oven on a cookie rack or baking sheet Set the oven to about 250 and let those jars be getting nice and hot while you're preparing the apples. The other thing that you can be doing to save some time is to fill up your canner with enough water to cover over 2 inches of each jar. Then set your water bath canner on the stove and put the lid on and let the water go ahead and be heating up while you're preparing your apples. It's also a good idea to go ahead and put your screw bands and your lids that will go on top of your jars into a pot of water and to let those start to simmer. Next, we want to rinse off our apples. Core. To prevent browning, you can apply a little bit of lemon juice over your apples or some ascorbic acid that can be found in the canning section of your grocery store. Then you want to just disperse either the lemon juice or the citric acid solution, and this will prevent browning. Next, you're going to make a light syrup for the apples by using 4 cups of water and 1 cup of sugar. Now, the sugar can be omitted in this, but however, you will turn out with maybe a slightly mushier apple product, so just keep that in mind. You're going to boil your apples for 5 minutes in boiling water in the syrup solution. And let's check and see how our water bath canner is doing. You'll notice that I put the jar rack up here at the top so that when we get our jars ready, we can just set them right down into the water and then put the rack down inside of it. We're almost ready. Now we have our apples ready to pour into our jars, and there's a nice little funnel that you can find at the store. Sometimes it comes in little canning kits where you've got a jar funnel that makes it a whole lot easier for cleanup time. Now we're going to pour our apples down inside the jar. And you want to fill these up to a 1/2 inch from the top. That's called headspace. Headspace is very important. You don't want too much headspace at the top, or you don't want too little. Too little is going to possibly cause the seal on the lid at the top to come off. So we want to try to get to a 1/2 inch. Then we want to take a rag or a wet paper towel and go around the rims of the jars, just to ensure that there's no apples or anything else on the top of the jars that might prevent that seal with the lid. It's good to take a spatula or something similar and go around the sides of the jars just to remove any air bubbles. And then next we're going to take our rings or our lids that have the little seal on the top. This is what causes the seal and keeps the air out of the jar. And remember, you have to use a new lid each time. These are not reusable. They must be thrown away. The screw bands, however, you can use these over and over. And when you screw these on, you just want it to be finger tight, not real tight, because it will tighten up on its own later in the canning process. Alright, now we're ready to take these to the canner. This is a canner jar lifter, and it's real convenient and handy so that you don't have to touch the hot jar to take this onto your canner. We're going to gently put our jars into the water bath canner. I only have 2 here. I normally would be canning a lot more than this. I think I'll put this on this side just to balance it out. Now you want to carefully take your rack and let it down gently into the water. Now you'll see here that I don't have the jars covered, so that means I need to go and get some more water to put on top of this. You want at least 1 inch to 2 inches on the tops of your jars before you start processing it. At the end of the 20-minute processing time, you're going to take the jars, lifting the rack out very carefully. And you now have your jars of canned apples.